Who dat and good evening, everybody, to the Who Dat Confessional podcast. It is Thursday, February 1st. We are deep into what is our off season, even though the Super Bowl still has got to be played. But that means that there's a lot of things going on, a lot of news going on, lots of things to keep up with if you're a New Orleans Saints fan. Jeff Ireland was talking pretty openly with media today at the Senior Bowl. Eric McCoy's been named to the Pro Bowl as a replacement, which I personally think a lot of love needs to be given to those guys. I don't care if Demario Davis is an alt. I don't care if Eric McCoy is an alt who's replacing Frank Ragnow, who will not be able to participate. I personally think it's a fantastic achievement, and I think it's awesome because I do believe that there are players for this team that played at a high level. I do think that Eric McCoy and Demario Davis both did, so shout out to both of them. So we have Derek Carr. That conversation is currently about restructuring his contract, and then, of course, more stuff from the Senior Bowl. So we'll try to cover a lot of that, go through it, get into the nitty-gritty, get into the deep, roll in the deep just like Adele. But before we do that, we try to do what we always do, which is give a shout out to Who Dat Nation, the ones that make this podcast happen, because if not, it would just be me rambling into the ether to myself. But thankfully, there are amazing, wonderful, incredible Who Dats out there. Listen, like Rainey, It's Poppy 504, 992 Ras, James Griffon, Charles Como Jr. Good to see you. We the Gods, Prokaryotic. Hey, proud of me for pronouncing that right. Brian W. the second, Golden Solar Flares, UVC Radiation, Gamma Waves, Sunblood times 3, TJ, everybody else, who that to you? Welcome on in to the show tonight. Pammy Whammy, Brandon Cormier, good to see you. AJ Gaines, Saul Munoz, Saul M, Gundam, who that to you? And as he's coming in with the hot take of the kid from Tulane is insanely accurate. And shout out to the quarterback from Tulane, who I did make a retweet today. We're talking about Michael Pratt. If y'all haven't followed him. Now, I do want to go ahead and say that, or remind everybody, and this is my experience from working the Senior Bowl, is just to remember that the Senior Bowl is a place of confirmation and networking. It is not a place of scouting. And what I mean by that is nobody is going to go to the Senior Bowl and just suddenly first-time scout, I won't say almost never, because there are times where scouts can't see a guy in college, especially if he's like a Division II guy. Maybe they don't get around to getting to that one, and they could just now kind of seeing that in action. But a lot of times it's general managers and coaches' first times to see some of these guys, so that can have an impact in terms of on the board. But generally speaking, the scouting reports are done, but the interview process is big. So for anybody about to ask, hey, did the Saints meet with Michael Pratt? Yes. In fact, they did multiple times. They have spoken to Michael Pratt, as did the Denver Broncos, which he actually said today at an interview there at the Senior Bowl that he had actually met with them twice for kind of in-depth interviews. But that's also pretty normal. So I don't want to, have the viewers and the listeners read too much into that, because I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, literally every player at the Senior Bowl the New Orleans Saints met with. That's just standard procedure. At the same time, that doesn't mean that it has no value, because we know, following the New Orleans Saints, they draft people from the Senior Bowl. They like people from the Senior Bowl. And the biggest reason why is not just like getting to see them in person for the first time, like, we're talking about Dennis Allen or Mickey Loomis. The big thing is that's where the interview process really starts kicking in for people who are in the front office and everything, where it's not just a regional scout heading over to Tulane or heading over to Texas AMU or heading over to Oregon and getting talking to the coach, talking to the player. Is actually getting the coaching staff and the front office involved, and even the head of the scouting departments involved, that can help really tip that over. I mean, this season is all about medicals, interviews. That's what really gets players up the ladder. And then, of course, the Underwear Olympics is pretty freaking dope, too. Everybody loves the Underwear Olympics. So, yeah, I mean, speaking of things that were going on, Jeff Ireland was talking pretty heavily to the staff at that one. And then Drew Brees actually had some recent interviews as well when he was opening up his new business. He has his business called Small Sliders in Metairie. I got a press release sent to me on it. I'm like, no, I'm not going to make a video on this, but I can at least, talk about it, I guess. Anyway, at his business opening, of course, they're talking to him about football, and he's talking about Derek Carr and Dennis Allen getting booted the games and searching for an offensive coordinator. And we can dive a little bit into that in a bit. But one thing that stood out to me was Jeff Ireland talking about how much success he believes they've had in drafting and wanted to see more of some of the guys here recently, which I personally agree with. I mean, and I've said that I believe the Saints have been a very good drafting team with two, I would call, glaring issues. Now, those issues are not because the scouting department is bad. Personal opinion. He even came and said, and I really feel like the quote of what he said, maybe I'll play the audio and let y'all kind of determine for yourself. But I really feel like what he said backs up what I've been telling y'all for a while now, which is about Isaiah Foskey wanting to have seen a little bit more of him. But we'll play that. We'll let y'all kind of decide. But I think the New Orleans Saints have drafted really well. The two issues being they get hyper folks fixated due to the coach on one particular position. So that's a problem. And don't draft enough. You just don't. Like drafting 5 people, drafting 3 people, drafting 6 people. Think of the least they draft is 4. That's not enough. That's simply not enough, folks. That's not good enough. And in fact, what I'm going to do is we are going to play for y'all the audio clip of Assistant General Manager Jeff Ireland talking about the draft situation here recently. Shout out to Fletcher who put this together. So shout out to Fletcher. Fletcher's the one that shared this initially, I believe. So I want to give credit to the reporter who asked the questions. But let's go ahead and let y'all hear.
I do like last year's draft. I mean, you wish we had a little bit more information on some of the guys that we drafted. I mean, Nick Saldivari. We got a really good evaluation of Jordan Howden. We got a really good evaluation of Brise. You know, wish we would have gotten a little bit more out of Foskey, and you'd love to see the young quarterback play. And, you know, Kendre splashed, you know, there in the last game, and we feel really good about him. You know, our postseason evaluations that we had with our coaching staff, man, there's some really glowing remarks on really all of the guys that we drafted. We feel really good about them. You know, from my perspective, you know, going into another draft, you just wish you had a little bit more information to say he is this, you know, or he is that. And, you know, there's still a little bit of information still left out there that's a little bit unknown. And we just continue to develop those guys. And but we feel really good about all of them.
So, yeah, big one there. Obviously, Foskey name coming to the top there. Saldivari did end up getting some good reps, but kind of being an unknown Foskey, I think that you've seen a lot of positives. And apparently there are a lot of people positive about Jake Haener in the building, but I would still say please don't let that prevent you from drafting a quarterback. But, you know, one thing I will say is a huge positive about keeping a quarterback in development is giving them time to fix the problems. And you've seen great quarterbacks and good quarterbacks in recent memory do that. I mean, Aaron Rodgers coming into the league had a lot of things that had to be fixed mechanically, and they were. So when Favre left, he was good to go. Jordan Love also had things that had to be worked on. And when Aaron Rodgers finally shipped out, Jordan Love, in my opinion, had a really good season. And I'm not trying to say that Jake Haener is the next Jordan Love. I'm not. But what I am saying is that he can benefit from waiting. Right now, the two guys that I just referenced with Rodgers and Love are first-round talents, not fourth-round picks. But at the same time, you want to have those guys have time to sit with an offense and then come in firing, and that's what you kind of hope for. So it is it's curious to see where that ends up going, right? And see if they choose to draft a quarterback, but I don't think that Jake Haener prevents them from drafting a quarterback this year. They simply would have to find a quarterback that fits them and is something that they want. I think that's the big key there, because everybody gets kind of like tied up with the idea of, well, this team wants this quarterback right now. Well, why shouldn't the Saints want that as well? And actually, Drew Brees talked about it, and building a team around the structure that you have and around your players. And there are just some guys who don't come in immediately fit, but maybe you can develop a guy into what fits. And he talked about building around Derek Carr. And if that's what they're going to do, that Derek Carr should have input in, that moving forward. So we'll see how they end up taking it, strategy-wise. But I love what Jeff Ireland said. And the only thing that I have to really add is I really, 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 really hope the New Orleans Saints draft more players. I'm talking 7, 8, 10 guys. 10 is a bit, of a hope and a dream, because the New Orleans Saints just simply don't draft that many players. But at the same time, historically, you look at a lot of good teams in the NFL, and they'll have great drafts and deep drafts. And it's something that held up Bill Belichick's team for a long time. Now, I'm not trying to take anything away from Bill Belichick as a head coach, nor Tom Brady being a Hall of Fame level quarterback. But you go and look at their drafts for about 15 years, and you had a very consistent theme with Bill Belichick. I mean, for example, how about I rattle one off for you? The 2015 NFL draft. You want to know how many picks they picked that year? I'll tell you. Good. You don't have to guess. They drafted 11 people. 11 people. But you might think, well, maybe that's a one-off. Maybe they just did that and they didn't do it. Okay, the next year, 2016, guess how many they drafted? 9, with 3 third-rounders. One of those ended up becoming a quarterback who spent a lot of time playing games, and Jacoby Brissett. Now, Jacoby Brissett has never turned into like a superstar quarterback or anything, but he did become an NFL quarterback who's thrown over 10,000 yards, over 50 touchdowns, and solid backup, if nothing else. I mean, so this has been a consistent strategy that you've seen with a lot of teams when they're in their really good mode. Like they're performing very, very well. Now, you will see the opposite happen sometimes. For example, we saw the LA Rams kind of say, hey, we're going to sell it all and, get rid of a lot of things like first round picks. But even then, if you look at this past year's draft, what did they do? They drafted over a dozen players. Now, they didn't have a first round pick. They had 1 second. They ended up drafting 2/3, a fourth. Then they drafted 4 people in the 5th round, 3 in the 6th, and 3 in the 7th. And regardless of whether those players actually play the games, it doesn't matter. You throw a ton of darts at the board and see what sticks. Why do I use the Rams as an example? Because of those people that they drafted, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them played at least 10 games for the Rams last year. 10. 2 of them had 8 or more sacks. They're 2 third-rounders between Kobe Turner and Byron Young. So good teams throw a lot of darts at the board and don't rely on that first-round pick just being the guy, because if you remember, the Rams have not had a first-round pick since Jared Goff, I think. I think 2016 was the last time they had a first-round pick. Yet, they continue to put out a lot of good rosters that are competitive. Now, I'm not going to deny that the Rams didn't have a setback this year or last year, but that setback was 5-12. But if you look at them since 2016, like literally since they last had a first round pick, last time they had a first round pick, 2016, they went 11-5, 13-3, 9-7, 10-6, 12-5, then had the fall off year at 5-12. And this year they went 10-7. They had one losing season, and in that span have not had a single first-round pick. To me, the key of what makes the Saints better is we've seen that they have a good scouting department. Let them pick more. Now, I'm not saying get rid of your mid-round pick. I'm not saying that at all. Like, I'm not saying the New Orleans Saints should just get rid of their mid-first-round pick and just trade it all away. But I am saying that the biggest issue for me with the New Orleans Saints lately has been that they don't draft a lot. 2022, they drafted 5 guys, 2 of those being first rounders, one of them that has not panned out. Only 5 people means there's very little room for error. 2020, they drafted 4 people. 2019, they drafted 5 people. There's little room for error when you do that. And I think the New Orleans Saints need to get back, because they did used to draft more, like early back in the Mickey Loomis in control era. Believe it or not, the Saints had very large drafts. For example, 2002, Mickey Loomis is with the team. They also had 2 first-rounders that year. They drafted Dante Stallworth and Charles Grant. Then they would also go and add Charles Bentley, James Allen, Hugh Craver, Mel Mitchell, J.T. O'Sullivan, John Gilmore, Darius Moore. And of those names, everyone played in the NFL except the 7th-rounder Darius Moore. There was a time where the New Orleans Saints would draft consistently at least 7 or 8 people. In fact, 2006, where we talk about being one of the best drafts in team history, they drafted more than 7 people. I think that's kind of more than key than anything. It's a real numbers game, and letting your scouting department go out and find a wide swath of guys who can help you out. Oh, let's not forget, 2017, they drafted 7 guys, right? Now, they got lucky that basically everybody they drafted in 2017 ended up being a good NFL player. Literally all of them. Even Al-Qadim Muhammad from the 6th round has been a consistent player. He's played over 80 games in the NFL. Now, he's not been a stud, but dude, he played 80 games in the NFL. Numbers is what we got to get the Saints team to get onto. Anyway, that turned into a long monologue. So I apologize for said monologue. I just wanted to kind of like speak my piece on the Saints and their issues. So, but yeah, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. The Saints need to draft at least 7 players. I'm in agreement with you. Now, right now, we haven't seen what the comp picks are, but according to Tankathon and what the New Orleans Saints are expected to have, here's the current expected first round pick, second round pick, fifth round pick, fifth round pick, fifth round pick, fifth round pick, sixth round pick, sixth round pick, seventh round pick. So there is a projection for them to have up to 9. I think they end up with 8, and one of those fifth is actually a fourth rounder. So I think they'll end up with first, second, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. I think that's what they'll end up with. That said, we'll see. No matter what, they already have first, second, fifth, and then they have sixth, seventh. So they have 7 now, but they should get at least 2 comp picks, with one of them potentially being a fourth round pick. Please don't trade all those to trade up, right? Select those guys because your team has shown that your scouting department has shown that they can find the holes. And that's why I get excited when the Senior Bowl comes around, because the interview process is so big. You're really seeing, does this person fit this team? So, yeah. Trying to think. I was just trying to think of it like the last mid-rounder group that I think that just failed for New Orleans. I really can't think of one. Like the last set of mid-round draft picks that New Orleans tried that just didn't work. I honestly can't think of one. Now, 902 says Michael Pratt fell to the 4th. Would you pick him? I have no issue picking a quarterback in the mid-rounds. I really don't, just like I don't have any issue with Jake Haener. But you need to let somebody develop there, right? And we know that Derek Carr is the quarterback for at least this year. If you want to, I'm not trying to like make y'all mad, but it's quite possible that he's here for at least 2 years, just being honest. That's time to develop a quarterback and see what happens, but there's no guarantees. And there's a reason that most good quarterbacks come out of the first round. We went over this. Remember, we did this a couple weeks ago, where if you go look right now of the quarterbacks from this season that are the best results, like the best quarterbacks this year, almost every single one of them was a first rounder. All of them, period, point blank. And we'll do it again just for the sake of it, all right? So let's use TD passes, right? How about that? We'll use TD passes. That way we're not just using yards, because when we use yards, the first thing that happens when you use yards is, garbage stats or something like that. So we're going to use first rounders who had the most touchdown passes this year and where were they drafted. That sound good? All right, good, because Derek Carr is going to be number 10 on that list, and I don't need y'all cussing me out. Derek Carr, second-round draft pick. He's number 10 on the most TDs thrown this year. Y'all can yell at somebody else. Dak Prescott, fourth rounder. There's your fourth rounder. All right, here we go. Jordan Love, first rounder. Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, seventh rounder. Jared Goff, first rounder. Tua, first rounder. Josh Allen, first rounder. Baker Mayfield, first rounder. Patrick Mahomes, first rounder. You seeing a theme? So you definitely can find a quarterback outside the first round, and it can happen. But clearly the most likely to happen is to find him in the first round. So, and just be clear, 992, like, I like Brock Purdy. I don't think he's going to be on a Hall of Fame trajectory, but where you're at and where you land matters too, because as much as I love Patrick Mahomes, had Patrick Mahomes gotten drafted by the Carolina Panthers, I don't think he's having the same level of success as he is partnered with Andy Reid, who has always been a very good coach, and Andy Reid has now finally found what he needed to be an amazing coach, right? Because there is development on coaches as much as there is on players. So Senior Bowl is really important for that, and hearing Jeff Ireland talk about the draft process was encouraging to me, because it just sounds like they're on that same track, and I hope that they continue on that track. Tom Brady was a 6th round pick. If I remember right, Tom Brady was a 6th round pick. Brock Purdy is a 7th rounder. I will look it up right now. That way I can admit I'm wrong if I'm wrong. Tom Brady was drafted in the 6th round, pick number 199 by the New England Patriots in the 2000 NFL draft. Rev was right. Awesome. So, yeah, Munch says, not sure how late I am, but have you went over the contract restructuring? Yeah, we've not really mentioned it because it hasn't happened indefinite yet, but it is being discussed. So, if we go to, I think Spot Rack will do it. We'll let you do it. We'll go over it. But it hasn't been done yet. But there is potential for them to restructure the contract, which, of course, would save the New Orleans Saints a little bit of money and push a little bit down the road. Some people hate the way the New Orleans Saints do things. Some people don't care. Some people love it. Some people are indifferent. No matter where you're really at, it's a move the New Orleans Saints have consistently used for literally over a decade, and it's not something that should shock anybody. In fact, the last time the New Orleans Saints weren't under the salary cap during the start of the offseason is going all the way back to, I'm pretty sure, 2012. That's the last time they weren't. So the reason this matters is you've already got him having a guaranteed salary of, $30 million. He's got his prorated bonus and everything, but they could restructure him. And the restructuring could save this year, I'm pretty sure it could save $23 million. Now keep in mind, that would push more things down the road. Kicking the cans, the same thing that everybody talks about. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just telling you what the numbers are. And they are a team that is going to continue to use this method to manage the cap as long as they believe they are in some level of contention. And if they believe they can make the playoffs, they believe they can make the Super Bowl. That's what they believe. I'm not making you as a Saints fan agree. I'm not calling you a fool if you say that's silly. I'm simply telling you how they operate. So what is likely to happen is Derek Carr gets a restructure as they continue to move under the cap. And that way you'll see the New Orleans Saints have the ability to do as they do every offseason, which is make more moves than they're supposed to be able to make, because that's what we hear all the time. There's no way they can do this. It's all going to kill them. They're living in cap hell, and then every freaking year they get out of cap hell, and everybody gets mad, and the Nick Wrights start going, well, this is BS, blah blah blah. Restructuring Derek Carr gives them $23 million. So right now the New Orleans Saints, I think, as of today, are $83 million in the red. Restructuring Cameron Jordan gives them $9 million. Restructuring Derek Carr gives them $23 million. They did a special way of doing it with Marshawn Lattimore, because I do believe they're going to try to trade him, and the way they did it allows them to save money that way. Restructuring Alvin Kamara gives them $8 million. Restructuring Demario Davis gives them $8 million. Doing Taysom Hill's contract gives them like 6 or 7, depending on what happens with Ryan Ramczyk. If they restructured him, it saves them 12, but I don't know with Ryan Ramczyk's injuries. Heck, he might retire. I don't honestly know. So they've got plenty of moves to make, as they always do. Will they do all those moves? I don't know. We'll see. But the Derek Carr one seems like the most obvious one because it's the biggest chunk. It's the biggest chunk. And I think hopefully Saints fans have gotten to the point now where it doesn't bother them anymore, because they've just seen how it works. They've just seen so much of the New Orleans Saints to know, yeah, this is how they play it. And whether you like it or not, it's going to turn into goodness, right? Like, say it's going to be goodness. I think that the New Orleans Saints have shown that this is their strategy, and it's just going to work, right? It's just going to continue to be what they do. And until something changes in the league and how the league works, that's just what they're going to do. So let's just say they restructured everything. I'm going to do it real quick, just using OTC just for the heck of it. And I'm going to restructure Cameron Jordan, Ryan Ramczyk, Alvin Kamara, and let's see what they're going to get down to. I've done 3, and I'm already cut it in half, right? So let's just do a couple more. Let's restructure that one. Let's say that you got a trade for Mr. Marshawn Lattimore, and the way they currently have that trade set up, if it happened after the deadline, you're probably going to be fine for it. But let's just say whatever, just have that trade set up. That's going to help them in the long run. Let's see what that turns it into. Submit. Hold on one second. I got to do all this. I probably should be doing this on screen, but y'all will live. Worse things have happened. So do that after June. That's going to save you a little bit more. Taysom Hill, I know they're going to do some level of restructure. I'm just going to do the blank number of restructures that they allow here on this. Eric McCoy's probably going to get one. I don't know what they're going to do with Andres Pete. I would be surprised if he's probably not just straight cut, but maybe they'll do like a post-June cut on Andres Pete, and we'll see what happens to that. And then one more, they can restructure Carl Granderson, who they literally just signed. All right, so here are the moves I made. I'm just letting y'all know. I restructured Derek Carr, Ryan Ramczyk, Cameron Jordan, AK, Demario Davis, Taysom Hill, and Eric McCoy. Andres Pete was designated as a post-June 1st cut, and then Marshawn Lattimore was traded, and they are now heavily into in the black. They're good to go. And that's without me touching anybody else. Like there are still options there. Like didn't do anything with Michael Thomas. I didn't do anything with Honey Badger. Didn't do anything with Cesar Ruiz or Marcus May or Jawan Johnson. All these guys who make a pretty significant amount of money / cap number. I didn't touch any of those. I'm just like, there you go. You're already back in the black. This is how they do their style, right? Like that's just who New Orleans is. Right or wrong, they are going to have the ability to get whatever mid-tier free agents they want, or they can go all in and get one big free agent, which I hope they don't, because this team is not one big free agent, nor are they one big draft pick from being a successful team. But all these strategies are real. So that's why you couldn't sign Henderson? What do you mean? What do you mean? You're saying Hendrickson? Because they absolutely could have signed Hendrickson. That wasn't an issue. They absolutely could have signed. People don't want to hear this. The Saints didn't want to sign T-Rex. They didn't want to. They could have. There is zero evidence that the New Orleans Saints could not have re-signed T-Rex. Trey Hendrickson could still be a New Orleans Saint right now, and the cap has nothing to do with that. They didn't want him. Now, that can make you mad at New Orleans for a different reason, but there is one reason why Trey Hendrickson was not re-signed. They did not want to pay a guy that they saw as only a rotational pass rusher. That's the reason. That is the only reason. They did not want to pay $1 million per sack for a guy that would not be on the field 3 downs, and they believed that Marcus Davenport would be that guy. They could have easily kept Trey Hendrickson. Cap had nothing to do with it. That was a Saints personnel decision. And we can, with 2020 retrovision, sit here and say that was dumb. That was stupid. Because what has Trey Hendrickson done? Trey Hendrickson has gone to Cincinnati. He's become an okay run defender. He's become a 3-down player. And he's got 40 sacks with Cincinnati in 3 years. Yeah, I would say that the Saints fumbled that bag. Literally. But could they have re-signed him? Absolutely. That was not an issue. But they saw Hendrickson hit 1 year of performance, was a rotational guy, and decided, we're not going to bother with it. Good luck to you. There you go. Like I said, and would I have re-signed Trey Hendrickson? Yeah. I mean, seeing how he's developed even further in Cincinnati, to me, it seems pretty clear that that would have been a good idea. Me? But it is what it is. And his contract, if I recall, his contract's not that crazy. Let me look up. I mean, it's high, but it's not ridiculous high. Let's see what he is. So in 2024, his cap number is $20 million. His base salary is 14.8. He did not sign a New Orleans style contract, which means there's no void years on his contract. There is no kick the can method. It's just a normal 3-year contract where the middle of the contract is the highest value, and then it starts tapering off in the end. Like next year in 2025, his cap number is only $18.6 million. So they did a normal, if you want to call it that, contract when he did his little 5-year contract. But the Saints could have paid that. Like, that wasn't an issue. Like, the Saints could have, and you can see that in who they've ended up paying since then. Right? Like, I'm not trying to, I promise. Oh, God, I'm going to get, I'll be very careful because it's a New Orleans native. But, Honey Badger, y'all realize that he's making good money? Like, I'm not trying to say he's making stupid money, but his cap number this upcoming year is over $12 million. I'm not saying he's making stupid money, but they didn't sign him for pennies on the dollar either. And he's over 30 years old. Like, and again, that is zero insult meant at Honey Badger, who I think is still a good player. He's just not an all pro level player anymore. I think he's still good. But the point I'm making is in 2024, he'll take up 5% of the cap. In 2024, Trey Hendrickson takes up, I think, 8% of the cap. So it's double. But I mean, could the New Orleans Saints have made a move? Absolutely, because they make moves. That's what they do. You know, it's neither here nor there. If New Orleans wants to make any move they can by how they manipulate the cap, as long as the cap keeps growing, they're fine. The day that the cap stops growing, they are in trouble, like when COVID happened. But as long as the cap keeps growing, they can keep kicking things. Yeah, and that doesn't even bring up Marcus May, which let's bring up Marcus May's contract. Marcus May is 2024 worth $9.6 million cap is his cap number. $9.6 million. He makes up 4% of the cap. And he'll be 31 years old. And then he voids in 2025. So, again, is that like a bad thing? Kind of like determine for yourself, but it's just the way that New Orleans works. It's just how they work. You know, they were willing to give, you know, Michael Thomas a massive contract. And sadly for the Saints, that hasn't played out because of injuries. But that was a huge contract, and it was a fine contract, and he ended up having an amazing season the year after the contract. But hell, Michael Thomas's contract number coming into this year is $12.4 million. I would be astonished if he is not cut as a post-June 1st cut. Like that would be my prediction, is he's a post-June cut. Maybe they do some type of like sneaky extension and then cut something, but he gone. He gone. And doing him as a post-June 1st cut, I think saves them $6 million total versus a pre-cut. It would cost them $8 million. They'd have to eat it. But they do it as a post-June 1st cut that saves them $6 million. Now, he'll still have dead money on the books, but it'll save them as a post-June 1st cut. So that was the biggest contract they've technically ever signed. Well, Lattimore is right there, but they're both really high. So they're both very high. I'd be very shocked if we see the man, the myth, the Twitter legend being here next year. I don't like Michael Thomas, but we're not getting into that again. Now, says if you go who they lost going into 21, you would be surprised they lost like 20 players. That's a lot. It sounds like a lot. Now, do every other team in the NFL. Believe it or not, a lot of teams have turnover. Very rarely do you keep entire groups together. And you only keep entire groups together for maybe 2 years at a time. Here's a great example. Kansas City Chiefs are in the Super Bowl again, but they are missing one of the most expensive players in the NFL. And we can't pretend like they would not be a better offense if that player was still there. But he's not. And that player next year is going to account for 13% of the Miami Dolphins cap. It actually gets worse. This contract is one of the reasons that like you'll never see Mickey Loomis do this type of contract. 2026. I realize this is a few years away, but hear me out. 2026. Would y'all like to know what the percentage of the cap is for Tyreek Hill? Y'all ready for this? He's going to make $56 million. Well, his cap is $56 million, and he has 20% of their cap in 2026. Now, I know that that's a couple years away, but Tyreek Hill, a receiver who will be 32 years old, will take up 20% of the Dolphins' cap. Some people out there are just willing to spend crazy money on free agents. What did the Kansas City Chiefs do? They replaced Tyreek Hill. Now, did they replace Tyreek Hill with a guy who is just as good as Hill? Arguably, no. At least not yet. But they replaced him. Who did they replace him with? Rashee Rice. Rice is going to be a 1,000-yard receiver, in my opinion. very soon. They got him in the second round, and he is cheap as dirt. No offense, I'm not trying to be insulting. He caught 77% of his passes this year, 7 TDs, and almost 1,000 yards. So Tyreek Hill is going to be 20% of the Dolphins' cap at over 30 years old. Rashee Rice is cheap as dirt. And while not as good as Tyreek, and be very clear, I'm not saying that he's as good as Tyreek Hill. The benefit is you have Patrick Mahomes, but that was his rookie season. Like his rookie year, he put up about 1,000 and caught 77% of the things thrown at him. Let's see what he develops into in 2 to 3 years. And again, none of that is meant as shade at Tyreek Hill. My point is that you can have great players on good teams, and it's not uncommon for those great players to get poached somewhere else. For reference, Tyreek Hill's first year in the league, he only had 600 yards receiving. Now, Tyreek Hill, again, I'll be very, very clear. I am not downing the man. The man literally was the best wide receiver in the NFL last year. 100%, hands down. First team All-Pro. Literally was in the MVP voting last year. He had 1,800 yards this year. He had 2 straight 1,700-yard seasons. None of this is to say that Tyreek Hill is not absolutely redonkulous. But good teams lose players all the time. It's actually not that uncommon. So, like, it doesn't bother me when the Saints aren't willing to give Trey Hendrickson $20 million as long as the replacement they plan works out. The reason that we care so much about T-Rex is the plan didn't work out at all. It bombed twice and possibly a third time. Davenport, Turner, Foskey. So, anyway, my point being that you're going to eventually see great players get signed elsewhere. And that's actually why, and I know people who will comment after this will not like what I'm about to say, and I'm okay with it. You are allowed to have a different opinion to me. I am absolutely one of the biggest proponents for getting rid of Lattimore right now. Why? Because you have 2 corners who are very good on the outside, who are younger and cheap as balls. Cheaper than balls. The cheap as Reggie. They're literally cheap as Reggie. Trade Marshawn Lattimore in his prime, move him, get stuff. Better to move on somebody too early than to move on somebody too late. Now, I know that sounds insensitive, but I know Marshawn Lattimore will go anywhere, perform well, and if he got traded, he'd probably immediately get an extension with that team. See, Don says the Debo's good, but he's not sold on Alontae Taylor. Alontae Taylor, both in 2023 and 2022, put up really good numbers as an outside corner. It's only in the slot that he really struggled. So I'm actually very confident in the New Orleans Saints on the outsides if they got rid of Marshawn Lattimore. I would hate to see Lattimore go because I think Lattimore is a fantastic player. But he's also one of the only pieces that New Orleans has that could actually, in a trade, get them something of value. And I would say of significant value. You take the risk on Taylor outside if they got something back for Lattimore? Yeah. Now, I'll be very clear. I'm not saying trade him for anything because if somebody just like, hey, we'll give you a 4th-round pick, screw it, keep Marshawn Lattimore. Okay? Don't trade him for a 4th-round pick. But if we're just talking about finding value and is he valuable, then yeah, more. Definitely, see what you can get. Because again, to me, the draft is so big. And you got to remember that we're talking about a skill position. Like all these guys that you're seeing at the Senior Bowl right now, in some ways, are already more athletic than Marshawn Lattimore. Just because Marshawn Lattimore is getting older. Probably have a 1st-round pick to move Lattimore. I think a 2nd would probably do it, to be honest with you, just given his age and the fact that he's had a couple years of injury history. But, yeah, I'm cool with that. And just to discuss, Marshawn Lattimore, who they already did a slight adjustment on, Marshawn Lattimore coming into this season is 6% of the Saints' cap, and $14.6 million is the cap number. So if they were to trade him and designate him as like a post-June 1st trade, and they've already done like that special restructure, I think it ends up saving them like $18 million or something like that. I'd have to go back and look, and Ross was always better with the numbers anyway. It saves him a lot of money. And he's still in his prime because he's 27 now, but he was 28 next year. So if you trade him, you're still getting a quality corner who probably has more quality years left in him. So I'm very curious to see what they end up doing with them. And the worst thing that could, happen is that you keep him and you've got a really good corner. So hope he stays healthy. 902 says you're not getting anything high for a cornerback, only third or down. I disagree. I disagree. I do. I disagree. And you look at the history of trades, like by position, you'll find that you get a lot more depending on what you're trading for. And for example, let's look at Marcus Peters. Now, I'm not a huge Marcus Peters fan, but let's go back a few years ago. Marcus Peters ended up getting them a second and a fourth round pick. So the Rams traded him to, the Chiefs traded him to the Rams. And when the Chiefs traded him to the Rams, they got a sixth round pick. The Chiefs got a second round pick and a fourth round pick. And the Rams got Peters and a sixth. And that's just one recent example I can think of, like off the top of my head. That's literally just one. That's you are definitely going to get more than a third unless you're talking about extenuating circumstances. But again, I would be shocked. Can it happen? Absolutely. And every year it changes, right? Some years you'll see it fluctuate. Some years it'll fluctuate. Some years it won't. But history shows that you can definitely get a second or even a first. What was... trying to think of some more just in history. Let me see. I'm going to pull up just corner trades update. Let me just look up corners, okay? Just corners. Just corners. These are the recent trades for cornerbacks. I'm only going to give you corners. So Green Bay received a third round pick for Rasul Douglas. And that was just last year in the middle of the season. Marshawn Lattimore is better than Rasul Douglas, but that's just me. I'm also only going to do ones that include draft picks, so we're not going to do player for players. I think that's fair, right? Is that fair? That's fair. I get to decide because it's my channel. Ha ha. I'm just messing with y'all. But, okay. All right. Sorry, I got to scroll down because there's a bunch of these that don't matter. Like, for example, when the Saints got Nick Saldiveri, the draft pick, they sent Terrell Smith and Rashawn Johnson, or they sent a fourth and a fifth that became those. But let me see what else we got. Got to keep scrolling. Any players? Or is there a way for me to sort out the draft picks? So trades, corner. Okay, so I'll just have to scroll through and find more of those. But I just gave you one that definitely was. I guess I should do it when it's during or before a season. So like William Jackson only went for a 6th round pick. So there's one that's kind of like meh. Stephon Gilmore went for a 5th, but Gilmore's like super old. Jalen Ramsey went for a 3rd. But Jalen Ramsey also went for a 3rd and a player. So Jalen Ramsey went and Hunter Long went. So they got a player who is, we call him a role player. What was Hunter's role last year? How did he do? Did he start? He did not. So he was just a role player. So they got a player and a 3rd round pick for that one. So they got a player. Whether it's a meh player or not, they got a player. Let's keep going. I'm just curious because sometimes I can be wrong. It's happened before. So you had Cleveland got a 5th round pick and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the quarterback, when they traded Troy Hill, which I felt like they got a steal on that deal. They got a steal on that one. We got to go in back. It's tough because, again, I'm trying to. Wow, I forgot about this trade. Rock Ya-Sin got traded for Yannick Ngakoue. Man, what a trade that was. Like, I feel like there was a one-sided winner on that one. There's a really one-sided winner in that one. You had C.J. Henderson was traded for Dan Arnold in a 3rd round pick. So there's you one. Bradley Roby was acquired for a third and a sixth. You're going to tell me that Marshawn Lattimore is not more valuable than Bradley Roby? No offense, Bradley Roby. But there's you an example. And there are a whole bunch of these. And I can hear what I'll do is I'm going to actually send y'all the list. Y'all can pour through it too. But in my opinion, Marshawn Lattimore for a second actually has precedence here. Like there's multiple examples of very high-end guys getting good picks. Now there are times where you see one that's kind of shocking and you go, wow, how did that happen? But generally speaking, especially when you're talking about like before the season starts and stuff like that, you see some pretty high round picks getting exchanged here. In a hypothetical scenario, how would Bill Belichick as the head coach be with the Saints? Literally not possible, because I don't think Bill Belichick will accept a role that does not include him having full control, which would then include the roster. I don't think that's actually an option. So I'm just being honest. I don't think it's even, I think that's why he doesn't have a team. Because I think he is hard set on, I'm going to be in control. Darius Slay, by the way, was a third and a fifth round pick when Detroit traded for him. Or Detroit traded him to Philly. Third and a fifth. So a second, maybe Gary and Conley was a third round pick. Like that's what they traded for. Gary and Conley, third round pick. Now, Rams, Jacksonville, this is 2019. Jacksonville got a first-round pick, a first-round pick, and a fourth-round pick. So I mentioned that one because 992 brought up Jalen Ramsey. And you are right that Jalen Ramsey's most recent one was a third. Let's see Jalen. I'm pull up Jalen Ramsey again just so I can have all of his stuff in front of me. So Jalen Ramsey's most recent was a third. However, when Jalen Ramsey was younger, he was going to be 26 before this trade happened, so he's, let's say, a year and a half younger. He was 2 first-round picks and a fourth. So I personally look at that and go, yeah, I mean, thinking a second or even a first to a certain team, if you can like really talk them into it, is definitely a possibility for Marshawn Lattimore. Anyway, just food for thoughts, right? Food for thoughts. Nichols says, I'm saying excluding the front office stuff. Well, that's the thing. I don't think you can. Maybe it's just the way my brain works. I can't even compute your question because there is no scenario where Bill Belichick comes to the New Orleans Saints and has that level of control. It's just, there isn't one. There's not even to me, it's not hypothetically possible. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but you're not going to come in and move Mickey Loomis and Kai Harley out the way. It's just not. So I can't even hypothetically, I'm just too dumb. Go ask another podcaster that's smarter than me because my brain can't compute it. Bill Belichick wants to come in and have complete control all the way up to the owner. And it just, I don't think it can happen. I can't do it. I can't compute. I'm too stupid. I got smooth brain. 0 IQ here, man. 0 IQ. So, shout out to all the other podcasts that don't have a smooth brain, 0 IQ host. Shout out to all of them. I'm late. Have we talked about how Carr somehow doesn't have input in the choice of OC? I mean, he definitely does. Well, he should, rather. Let me say he should. He should. And I say that with all sincerity. He absolutely should. Absolutely should. That's what Drew Brees said. Drew Brees said he should. I'll be surprised if he has no input. Do I think that he has veto powers? No, not at all. I don't think that he has veto powers, but I do think that he has input. So if Bill is still there next year and doesn't want to be GM and you fire DA, then you would be one of the best you would hire Bill. I'll be honest, 992, I'm about to have an unpopular opinion. And if somebody calls me an ageist, that's fine. I think that Bill's dominance is over in today's NFL. I think Bill Belichick is, in my opinion, the greatest head coach of all time. That's my opinion. I think he's the best singular head coach ever. I think his time is over. He'll be 72 this year, 2024. In your case, he'd be 73. And I'm not trying to sound like just an evil ageist person, but you look at the NFL teams like offenses and defenses, it's the ones who are bringing something new. Like, I don't want to use the word young because young doesn't necessarily mean they're better, right? Like, you can be 35, doesn't mean you know more than Bill Belichick. But it's people who are bringing something fresh and reinvigorating the NFL. Bill Belichick has not done that in a long time. That doesn't mean he's not a great head coach. But it's my same argument against people like Dennis Allen and against people like, John Gruden as head coaches and stuff. They're not inventing anything. They're not doing anything new. They know great football. And you can sit down with them and tell that they know more about football than you will learn in 4 lifetimes. But I don't think that he's the guy anymore because he's not adapting to the modern NFL. I think that man should just retire and go into the Hall of Fame, be the greatest head coach of all time. I mean, the only argument for him staying in the NFL is if he wants to get to like 350 wins. He's got over 300 NFL wins. It's nuts. 300. Like, you've done it all, man. You've won like 6 Super Bowls? He was coach of the year 3 different damn times. I mean, you're done. Hang it up. So there's a reason the only head coach interview he got was the Falcons. The NFL knows he's done. And I still think that Bill Belichick could do well. I really do. Like, and the reason I believe that is, like, look at even the past 4 years. Tom Brady left. He still had 2 seasons where they won 10 or more games over the past, few years. Even when Bill Belichick lost a Hall of Fame quarterback, the man still had success. But the only real reason for him to stay in the league is if he wants to go for the all-time win record. So that all-time win record is held by Don Shula, of course, for those that don't know, but Don Shula coached for 33 years. Bill Belichick has coached for 29. Don Shula has 328 wins. If Bill Belichick wants to take the record of wins and go to 329, sure, but he's going to have to give up a lot more power than what he currently has. Also, fun fact, Andy Reid is actually in 4th place all-time in wins. 4th all-time in wins. Sean Payton is 21st, tied with John Harbaugh. Now, Sean Payton, he's only been coaching 16 years. Bill Belichick has been coaching 29 years. Sean Payton probably is going to end up in the top 15 at some point because number 15 is Pete Carroll, who is obviously done, and he's only at 170. I think Sean Payton's probably going to end up in the top 15, maybe even the top 10. But I doubt he's going to get literally double the amount of wins he has now and be in the top 5. So, let's be honest. I think it's a fair question. Bill's coaching career when he was worse without Brady. Well, I mean, I think everybody's worse without a Hall of Fame quarterback. But that's kind of my point. I think he was still good even when he didn't have that. Right? Like, let's talk about his quarterback. I mean, he took Cleveland. So he took over Cleveland and built Cleveland into a winner. They won 11 games in 1994. And that Cleveland team didn't have nobody. He had to build that joker from scratch. Vinny, and an old Vinny Testaverde. Vinny Testaverde, who was over 30, like Derek Carr, built that team into a winner. And then he went to New England after, first year in New England, losing. But Drew Bledsoe was going to be the Super Bowl champion or Super Bowl quarterback. They managed to stumble into Tom Brady, and that worked, and that's fine. But it's not like he's a bad coach. Hell, in 2021, they won 10 games, which was a shock to me. I didn't think that was going to happen. Did anybody else think they were going to win 10 games in 2021? Like, that was Jones' rookie season. And I've never liked Mac Jones. So, I say the Browns wasn't good, but I guess he did have to build them. Yeah, the Browns were terrible. Here, let me tell you the roster. And again, I'm saying all this just because I don't think that Bill Belichick should be viewed as terrible because of Tom Brady existing. I think it's the same thing with Sean Payton and Drew Brees. Both could have been equally great. Like, they both are Hall of Fame levels, and when you get those two to combine, great things can happen. But let's talk about the roster of the Browns when he took them over. Their starting cornerback was Bernie Kosar, threw 18 TDs and 9 interceptions. That was their starting quarterback. Their starting running back was Leroy Horde. Yeah. Kevin Mack, starting fullback. Starting wide receivers were Reggie Langhorne and Webster Slaughter. Neither of them were 1,000 yards, and neither of them got more than 3 receiving touchdowns. They only had one Pro Bowler on the team, and that was the defensive tackle, Michael Dean Perry. That was the team that he took over in 1991 with the Cleveland Browns. They went 6-10. The year after that, they went 7-9. What changed? Well, they swapped out quarterbacks because, well, things weren't necessarily going too great with what you had. Might as well try something else. So Mike Tamzaks was their starter, but meh. They got a new rookie fullback. That was cool. No Pro Bowlers this year, though, and mostly just aging veterans while they go through a rebuild. But you can notice that there's a lot more like 23-year-olds now on the team. Like they went and got younger guys to start replacing the aging veterans. 1993, they do it again, but something changes. They pick up Eric Metcalf, becomes an all-pro. Michael Dean Perry makes the Pro Bowl again. Young guy at running back starting to build around, and they picked up an aging Vinny Testaverde. Third year, third quarterback change. But now we got something that's still good enough, and we've got an all-pro running back. 1994 puts it all together. Eric Metcalf makes the Pro Bowl. Leroy Horde makes the Pro Bowl. Vinny Testaverde still right there. They picked up Bob Burnett, made the Pro Bowl. Michael Dean Perry made the Pro Bowl again. Pepper Johnson made the Pro Bowl. Eric Turner, young safety, makes the All-Pro team. So, like I said, there was development there. They brought those guys up. They made them better. They turned them into something. And it took time. And it worked. Hopefully nobody takes what I just said and turns it into a, well, maybe Dennis Allen can do that, because I don't believe in Dennis Allen. But I'm 100% here for Dennis Allen to prove me wrong. Like 1,000% here for Dennis Allen to make me look like an idiot. Please, Dennis Allen, make me look stupid. Like I am 1,000% down. Yep. But here we are. Testaverde must have been ancient when he retired. I mean, he was pretty old, but that's quarterbacks. It's also one like I don't understand when people are like, oh, Derek Carr is 33. I'm like, and Vinny Testaverde, by the way, was 44 in his last year in the NFL. He started the NFL in 1987 before I was born and finally retired in 2007. Yeah. Man was in 233 NFL games. Wild. Led the league in interceptions. Wow. Look at this stat line. Tell me that the NFL hasn't changed. His second year in the NFL, he threw 13 touchdowns and 35 interceptions. You tell me that man in today's NFL can have a 20-year career, you're out your damn mind. No way. No freaking way. None. Zero. Zilch. Nada. Nope. That's wild. Wild. Like, I'm not trash. I know it's the 80s, so it was a very different league, but I can't ever take any more Jameis Winston slander, because at least when Jameis threw 30 interceptions, there was 30 TDs to go along with it. This man threw 35 interceptions and 13 TDs. 1-3. Goodness. Like, he'd be out the league the next day. He wouldn't make it through the season in today's NFL. It was a different time. It was a very different time. Wow. What a time to be alive. What a thing to learn. What a thing to learn. Like, and for all of you out there who are Jameis truthers, because I know y'all still exist, I just gave you a name to go reference. Vinny Testaverde. Vinny Testaverde. For anybody who wants to trash talk y'all's man, y'all's lover, y'all's king, Jameis Winston, I need y'all to bring up Vinny Testaverde, because he wasn't even a rookie. Like, that was his second year in the league. And then he followed it up. He got much better, because in 1989, he threw 20 touchdowns and 22 interceptions. So he improved. Did great. Didn't have his first season where he threw 30-plus touchdowns until 1996 with Baltimore. Anyway, fun facts down memory lane. Fun facts down memory lane. Look, I love y'all, but we've hit an hour. We do try to keep these neat and tight. So we're going to wrap up. I appreciate y'all. Y'all are amazing. Who dat? God bless. We will catch you on the next Who Dat Confessional. Make sure you listen to this on iTunes, Google, iHeart Radio, Spotify, all the different places. Share it out with other Who Dats. Hopefully have a good time. Join us on the Discord. Deuces, that's me. We will catch you on the next one.